Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. Now, the deer herd in Michigan is estimated to be 2 million strong. And in Southeast Michigan, that number has been growing. You may have noticed that they gather in green spaces between our houses and businesses, jump fences, feast on gardens and landscaping, and unfortunately are hit by cars on roadways. Last year, there were more than 58,000 reported deer vehicle crashes in Michigan, and that's an average of 158 per day. There is a growing coalition of cities and townships in Southeast Michigan that has decided to take action to reduce the deer population here. Deer culls. That is, they're hiring sharpshooters to shoot and kill deer in suburban areas where overpopulation is a problem. Farmington Hills is one of those cities leading this effort. In April, their city council approved a resolution to cull deer with sharpshooters. The resolution also includes safety provisions and directs harvested venison to be donated to food banks. Here to talk about the resolution is Bryan Farmer, Deputy Director of the City of Farmington Hills Special Services Department. Bryan, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So how big of a problem is deer overpopulation in Farmington Hills?
So it continues to increase. We started tackling this issue in 2014 when we recognized our residents started calling up saying we've got a problem. So in 2015, we started working with the DNR to determine what does that mean and how do we address that problem. So 10 years later, here we are today.
Here we are addressing the problem. And what were residents telling you? I know I have my testimony actually from my aunt. I want to see if other folks were feeling the same way. So she says this year, I've spent nearly $100 on plants that have already been eaten by the deer. My neighbor and I have resorted to using plastic flowers instead now. And she says, I even hit a deer on Orchard Lake about 10 years ago, totaled my vehicle. So she says they're everywhere in Farmington Hills. Is that similar things that you're hearing?
So that is happening in a lot of urban areas, and there's a lot of concerns. And we've done surveys, a couple different surveys, and not just landscape damage, but obviously, like you said, deer vehicle collisions are a big one. Ticks and Lyme disease is another fear. Other diseases, and the biggest reason why we need to manage deer is because the ecological impacts in our parks and our native species are being depleted. So that means the birds, the bees. The whole ecosystem's affected when the deer browses and takes all that food. That's why they're going into those neighborhoods and eating the hospices and things that people plant because they need food. And it really, there's a concern for the deer's health as well.
Yeah. And could we, if you could, just go into a little bit more detail about the nature of the invasiveness to the ecosystem, because it is such a huge issue to try to manage that.
So when you start, if you think about there's something called the browse line. So when you look at a forest and you see that up to a certain height, you don't see anything below that, on the ground. That means the deer that's the browse line, and that's where the deer have been eating. And a lot of times those native species that they enjoy eating are no longer there. And then we start seeing invasive species like garlic mustard seed, buckthorn, and others that aren't really as good for the habitat as other native species. So that's the biggest part of it's really looking at those deer impacts. It's not the number of deer. It's what are the impacts those deer are making within the communities. And we're seeing an increased impact in several different areas, not just the ecosystem, but deer vehicle collisions are rising. More people are calling saying, okay, I see too many deer now. I love the deer. And again, we're not looking to eradicate the deer. We're looking to balance the herd and reduce that to be a more palatable number and deer density in terms of square miles.
Yeah. And the resolution that we have been talking about, or that has recently gone in, includes language to hire sharpshooters from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to carry out targeted culls starting next year. And this resolution also includes provisions for public safety officials to conduct archery hunts in 2027. What kind of safety precautions are being taken?
So that's the number one thing that we heard from our residents was safety. And I think part of that reason is they don't understand how hunting works, for example. So when we look at archery hunting that's going to start to happen in 2027, it's really a way to balance the herd by managing through lethal means. So the goal is, back in the day, people used to hunt, and we had access to private land to be able to hunt. And so we didn't have the deer numbers that we currently have. So you hear about farms having a lot of deer, but they've limited the access to people to reduce that deer number. So it's the same thing happening in urban areas. So when you look at the overall that resolution of how it's going to work and safety wise. Sharpshooters come in, they use thermal imaging. They come in at night, so it's dark. They use suppressors on their guns, and they shoot at a angle so the bullet targets the deer and they drop in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to archery hunting, it's more of an organized approach. You're not going to see people walking down the street with their bows and arrows.
Like Katniss from Hunger Games.
They're not going to be like, hey, where can I go? It's going to be an all organized approach. So we're starting that with public safety officers. So, for example, we'll have 5 different locations where each of these officers will be hunting. It'll be a specific location. They'll know where they're going. We'll know where they're going. We'll know what time they're going to be there. We'll know what time they're going to be done. And that's the same thing as that grows, and not just Farmington Hills and other communities, it's going to allow hunters the opportunity to participate in those organized archery hunts, because that's one of the things too, is they just don't want, you've got all these deer that could be hunted and harvested, so they want opportunity as well to have that access. So it's got to be more organized. So it's a new approach that Michigan is taking across the state in terms of urban deer management. It's not the same as what we've heard in the past in terms of letting people just hunt wherever they want. It's really an organized, structured approach. They've got to go through shooting proficiency tests. They've got to learn tree stand safety. They got to have years of archery experience and hunting and buying licenses. So it's a whole new way of doing it. So Michigan is really going to be managing their deer in urban areas like they're going to be in farms the same way. It needs to happen. Like you said, the overpopulation of deer, it's across the state, and it's our responsibility to do something about that.
And there are, of course, critics of deer culls in Southeast Michigan, many just on the principle of not killing animals. What do you say to people out there who say that shooting deer is cruel or killing the animals is cruel? And is there any other way to reduce the deer population outside of a cull?
So it's our responsibility to manage the deer, and the recommendations from the Department of Natural Resources, scientists, studies that's occurred in the past is that the most effective way of managing deer is through lethal means, and that's either hunting or culling deer, so reducing that population. There's other methods that you'll hear from people that says, well, why not sterilize them? Why not vaccinate them? And the science behind that, studies have shown that it isn't effective, especially in free-ranging deer. If you look at the behavior of a deer and what happens during November when you start seeing deer run around and they say watch out more in November, it's because the does go in heat, and then the bucks get excited and they want to go get the doe. And so what happens is if you sterilize the deer and start massing or vaccinate, you start to change their habits a little bit. So when they go in heat, it may happen in March, may happen in June. So based on that science behind that, and the other thing when it comes to sterilization, I hate to get Ann Arbor tested this out, and the DNR has permitted testing before to see, let's see how this works, and it hasn't been proven to be successful. So when we look at an organized approach, it's consistently we need to do lethal means. But when it comes to sterilization and the idea of that, and you talk about humane methods, the way they sterilize deer is they will tranquilize them, so they basically knock them out. They cut out their ovaries, sew them back up, and let them go. And then the studies have shown, and if you talk to the people that manage some of these areas that have done that, you see these tagged deer from sterilizations that the deer didn't make it. Yeah. So a lot of times the sterilization, they didn't make it because of, maybe the surgery, maybe what happened. But basically you're taking these deer, you're throwing on a bed of pickup truck, opening them up, closing them up, and letting them go. So is that humane?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that to me and the audience. Actually, I think a lot of us, don't understand. Truly, we're not hunters, so we don't understand the process, or just don't understand in general. So you really did explain a lot there. Thank you so much. But just speaking of that, we are going to be speaking with the Department of Natural Resources, an expert coming up just afterwards as well. And we are speaking right now with Bryan Farmer, Deputy Director of the City of Farmington Hills Special Services Department. We're talking about the deer population in Southeast Michigan suburbs and the resolution that Farmington Hills City Council passed this year to conduct deer culls with sharpshooters. So you said this resolution was like 10 years in the making or so. A deer management plan like this requires buy-in from residents and elected officials, of course. So what kind of engagement did the city do with residents to hear questions and concerns about the new deer management plan?
So we began collecting data in 2015, and part of the part where we learned from our residents and the issues that were going on out there was they had several concerns, like we mentioned earlier: deer vehicle collisions, landscape damage, and then we also noticed things like in our parks, our ecological impacts. And so we did a survey in 2016, and when we started working with the DNR, which Chad Stewart, he's coming on later, he's very supportive. The whole DNR has been supportive in this effort, and they're willing to help every city out that needs support. So when we asked them in 2015, what do we do? They said, start writing down when residents call, log that, see what they're saying. They also said you could do an aerial deer count. So we did some of those. Flying in a helicopter, we did it, I think, 7 times, and really started to see a trend of increased deer population. We started to collect data in terms of deer vehicle collisions. And then that survey in 2016, we took what Ann Arbor did and a lot of those questions, because that's what the DNR recommended we do, and we asked those questions to our residents. And then we did another one. As time went on, we learned that it wasn't just Farmington Hills having this issue. It was a lot of other cities around us. So we actually created in 2021 a coalition of all these communities to be able to talk about the same concerns that we were having at Farmington Hills. So we worked with SEMCOG to do a survey of the 7-county area, and we have over 13,000 respondents. Mainly, there was mainly from Oakland County, and then almost 3,000 or so from Farmington Hills. And so getting that information from our residents, we learned that 73% in Farmington Hills had a concern of deer, and they wanted something done about it. A lot of those concerns had to do with, we mentioned earlier, the deer vehicle and ticks and Lyme disease. So the same concerns, and that's happening across our entire region. And we also started working outside of our region. We talked to people in Kent County, in Lansing, in Jackson, and they have the same concerns when it comes to urban areas. So it isn't anything new. It's more of the new part is how do we take this approach? So the resolution that you mentioned is it doesn't just say we're going to do these sharpshooter calls and organize archery hunts, but it's also going to lift our ordinances during those times. And then it's going to be put in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And a lot of communities may put it in their city master plan, because deer management needs to be a long-term organized approach that it can't happen 1 year and then we're done.
Yeah.
It's got to be every year from here on out. And the benefits of that is it's going to help the ecosystem, but also we haven't talked about the food benefits. And we have this natural resource walking around, and people in need, 1 in 7 families are food deprived. And this is a great opportunity to be able to harvest that food. So we're working with food banks. We're working with Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger, Hunters Feeding in Michigan, which those organizations help fund the deer processing to be able to provide the venison to make burger, to be able to get to those food banks. So little plug, if anybody wants to support that, they need your funding to be able to help pay for that processing so we can get it to these food banks.
Yeah. And Bryan, like you were just saying as well, can you talk about the importance of having all of the cities come together in the coalition? I mean, let's talk more about the Southeast Michigan Urban Deer Coalition. It was limited to Oakland County, but now we're seeing so much need across so many different cities and townships. How and why did the coalition expand to include cities across southeastern Michigan, including Wayne and Macomb?
So in 2015, I asked the question to the DNR, why are we doing this city by city? And that was the support that they provided. So it was a city by city approach. And we said, why don't we work together regionally and even statewide to be able to come up with basically a resolution that allows our city leaders to get the information they need instead of doing a bunch of research and years of what we did. Here's the information. You can either vote yes, we're going to manage the deer, and no, we're not. So since we've sort of went over that hurdle in April with our city council. So Farmington Hills voted yes. It was 6-1 in favor of doing some type of deer management with archery hunts and calls. And then the city of Farmington the next week unanimously voted yes. Southfield also did a unanimous vote to manage deer. So, and I've spoke with city managers, mayors, and they are all ready to go in the next 2 to 4 years to do something about the deer population. So residents are upset about the overpopulation of deer, but it's taken some time to get here. And now that 90% or so of the people, which we look at Michigan attitudes of about deer, and about 90% of those people are saying it's okay to manage the deer. And there's several reasons why they believe it's okay to manage, and we talked about those earlier. But 10% is like, I don't know if I want you to hurt the deer. But in the end, we're hurting the environment and the deer by not managing the deer. So it's important that we do that. So when Farmington Hills decided to take on this, I'm thankful that they finally did it after 10 years of like it happening and residents' concerns, that now that we've done it, cities now, it'll make it easier for them to regionally work together. And deer don't know boundaries. So if Farmington Hills did it alone, they're going to cross over from Southfield.
That's going to be my question. If you have it in like a silo almost, and it's just like one city's doing it and then no one else, it's just like, I mean, it's almost like Dave and I said, trying to take all the water out the ocean with a bucket. You know, you just can't really get that done.
Great analogy. Yeah. And that's the truth. I mean, so the deer will cross, and we see in travel corridors. And again, we talk about public safety. So we want to educate people. It's not just we're going to reduce the deer population through lethal means. We want to also educate people at the same time. And our city councils really want to push that. So we're creating a brochure that every city can use. So instead of every city come up with their own brochure, let's all share that through the Southeast Michigan Urban Deer Coalition. So it's really creating a bunch of templates. We're working with University of Michigan students, master students. There's 6 that's for the next year and a half. That's actually putting a lot of these resources together. Work with the DNR, work with the National Deer Association, Michigan Collaborative, several organizations that are really part of the whole bigger organizational effort to do this. It's not going to be a city staff person trying to figure out how am I going to do this. It's all these organizations that are helping with it, with the support of the DNR.
And Bryan, last question, the cooperation between Farmington Hills, the DER, and now other cities and towns, and even University of Michigan. Is there a lesson in here for better cooperation between government, cities, and residents?
Yes, I think it's just working together. I mean, there's all these resources out there. It's making a decision. Number one, that was the difficult part. What are we going to do? And our city leaders have that tough decision to make. But once that decision is made, I think we've gotten over that, and now we can actually start to manage the deer and reduce that the impacts that we're having. We don't know the number that we don't in the DNR. You hear from Chad Stewart. It's not about the number of deer; it's about reducing the number of impacts, and that's our goal overall. So the more cities that do that, the less we're going to reduce those impacts, and the more residents can feel safer. And again, at the same time, talk about education with. We're putting more signs out on the roads to be able to let people know. During those busy times of the year, we're sending media posts out there to say, hey, slow down. It's getting to be that time where you got to watch for deer even more. And then landscape. What can you plant that might be helpful? But we've learned that anything you plant doesn't work. I mean, we hear from your aunt that she tried this. Now she's doing plastic flowers.
Flowers, yeah. That's what she's resulted to, her and her neighbor at least. So that's what she's resulted to. But I want to say, Bryan, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. Bryan Farmer is Deputy Director of the City of Farmington Hills Special Services Department. Earlier this year, the City Council voted in favor of a deer management resolution to conduct deer calls with sharpshooters. Those are set to begin in 2026. Bryan, once again, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
Is the Metro. And WDET has weathered many changes in government priorities, but we've always had one constant, and it's always been you, our listeners. And right now, with looming threats of cuts to federal funding, we're asking for your help. Let's build a stronger WDET together, and we're aiming for 1,000 additional members to reinforce our future. So join us now at WDET.org/give and help us spread the word. Coming up, we'll speak with a deer herd expert from the Department of Natural Resources to find out why the deer population in Southeast Michigan is getting out of control. You all stay right there. We'll be right back on the Metro. On 101.9 WDET, Detroit Public Radio, I'm Tia Graham. The deer herd in Michigan is estimated to be 2 million strong. And last year, there were more than 58,000 reported deer vehicle crashes in Michigan. That's an average of 158 per day. In Southeast Michigan, that number has been growing. Joining us now to help understand why there's so many more deer in southeast Michigan suburbs is Chad Stewart. He is the Cervid and Wildlife Interactions Unit Supervisor at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. Chad, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me, Tia.
Of course. So, Chad, Metro Detroiters have been noticing more deer in their neighborhoods in recent years. They can become a nuisance, of course, eating people's landscaping and gardens, but they're also responsible for vehicle deer crashes, as we just heard. Why are there so many deer in the suburbs now? And what is the deer population like here compared to, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think what people are starting to experience is sort of a manifestation of several things happening right now. One, you've got just the deer biology and the deer population and their biology, their capacity to grow. So when you think about white-tailed deer, they're fairly long-lived species, especially in these suburban communities. There's not really many predators or things that are going to kill them, and their reproductive potential is incredibly high. The cute little fawns that you're seeing at this time of year, if they get to be about 80 pounds in December, they can actually become reproductive and breed and have fawns next summer. So they can breed early. They breed every year. So each year, female deer will typically have 1 to 2, and in many instances, 3 fawns. And then there's no such thing as menopause in white-tailed deer. So every year that they are alive, they will continue to have fawns. So they can breed early, they can breed for a long time, and they have multiple individuals or fawns every year. So their populations can grow very, very quickly.
Wow.
That combined with the fact that our ability to manage deer has been greatly reduced in recent years. One, primarily because the way we have historically managed deer is through hunters. We've lost over 250,000 deer hunters in Michigan since 2000. We used to be well over 800,000 hunters at that time, and we're currently sitting at about 550,000 active hunters a year. And that number is likely going to continue to decline over the next couple of years, because about 1 in every 4 to 1 in every 5 hunters that we have are over the age of 65 in Michigan.
Wow.
So our challenges with managing deer, combined with their capacity for population growth, is what we're likely experiencing in certainly southeast Michigan and other parts of the state as well.
Yeah, and recently or just a few moments ago, actually, we're speaking with Bryan from the city of Farmington Hills, and Farmington Hills recently approved a resolution to conduct deer culls with sharpshooters. And there are also dozens of other cities and townships who are now part of the Southeast Michigan Urban Deer Coalition. Why is it necessary to have a coalition, and why can't cities just manage their deer populations on their own?
Well, they certainly can manage deer populations on their own. We have the permitting capabilities to work with individual communities. But what's so innovative and unique about this coalition is now you're getting several different communities working together to solve what a common problem that transcends each of these communities. So they're looking at it more of a regional issue rather than an individual issue. So sharing those data points and the processes that are used to evaluate the impacts in their community, having a standard and consistency between those communities so there's a comparison, and then making these decisions jointly or using the same data and information available to make these decisions is to me an incredible strength that they've developed over this collaborative process that is fairly unique in talking with other colleagues in other states that not many cities or communities are doing. So while that's able to be done and locally and individually, I think there has a better long-term chance to have greater success working together.
And what else is the Michigan DNR doing to manage the deer population in southeast Michigan outside of some of the things that we've heard, like a deer cull, of course, extended season possibly, or other things like that?
Yeah, we've made a lot of changes, and we've sort of seen that this trend is likely going to occur, years ago, and we started to prepare for that. We've had reduced licenses, so making it easier for hunters to get licenses and cheaper in terms of our antlerless licenses, which is the deer that really controls the population growth, our antlerless deer or female deer. We have experimented with extending seasons. We've increased our bag limits. We've created flexibility with both our seasons and our licenses to allow hunters to go out and have a lot more flexibility with what they can hunt and what they can harvest. But what we're finding is that, this concept of like supply and demand is really taking into account. So the number of deer that are out there are so great, and the capacity for hunters to take the amount of deer necessary to control the population growth is just not sufficient, especially in these suburban communities where hunting is largely restricted. You've got very many parcel owners, many landowners with small areas that they own. It makes it really difficult to get in and either remove deer or gain access to deer. And that's one of the big problems that we're seeing, and that's one of the reasons why these special situations in these communities require a little bit more thought, and it's a little bit more difficult than just simply saying go in and do this or do that. It takes a lot more access and coordination.
We're talking about Michigan's deer population, which is estimated to be 2 million strong. Our guest is Chad Stewart, the Cervid and Wildlife Interactions Unit Supervisor at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. Now, Chad, we've spoken with folks on the show who've expressed desire to open up urban archery here in Detroit and some of the larger parks we have, like Rouge Park. Hunting in the city itself is something I never thought possible. Is an urban archery season in Detroit proper possible in the future?
There have been examples in other communities where there has been success with opening up hunting, especially with archery equipment, to remove deer, and they have been successful. There's communities outside of Lansing that annually take close to 150 deer with archery hunters, and they do it in a safe manner. Not every community is built to have that, so you do require some larger spaces of green space, and you also have to understand that there are potential limitations with what can be done there. So if you have a really large population, archers can be effective at certainly removing deer out of there, but the question is, can they remove enough? And we always argue that that's a really good practice or process to start. And if it works, then great, because there's really no cost associated with it. We've shown in other communities that it's a very safe and effective way to remove deer, and it's a great place to start. But also understand that you may need to go a step above, to get the deer population to where you want it to be, to start seeing the reduction in impacts that you hope to find more tolerable. So great place to start, certainly a possibility, but understand that there may be more needed in the future, depending on the structure of your community and the number of deer that presently reside in there.
And this is our last question here to you. A successful deer management plan is about more than having the right data and strategies. It also has to be implemented, and that comes down to the state government here in Michigan. So take baiting ban or different type of boundaries or restrictions in terms of hunting, like you just talked about a little bit earlier. What is the relationship between the DNR, who collects the data and interprets it, and the state government in Lansing, who makes the laws, and the governor, who is tasked with enforcing the laws? What's the relationship like there?
Yeah, so from the DNR standpoint, we have oversight of and responsibility for management of the statewide deer herd, and all the data that we have associated with managing them at the unit level or the county level. We have that. We can make that available. So much of deer management, though, is not only about population management, but it's also about managing their distribution on the landscape. And a lot of times that's what we see with these communities is that, a county level might be at a sufficient area or location in terms of the number of deer that they have in that county. But in certain communities, there are just way too many, and they're causing way too many problems. And that's where we really need to go in and work more collaboratively with these local governments, helping them understand the impacts that these deer are causing, the citizens' perceptions of that and their tolerance to white-tailed deer. Because at the end of the day, white-tailed deer really are a valuable resource in Michigan. We don't want them being viewed as pests or nuisance animals. So the best way to do that is to keep them manageable within the confines of their biological capacity, and then the social tolerances as well with people in that community. And we're happy to work with every community to try to get them to meet those localized goals and objectives that they have.
Chad Stewart is the Cervid and Wildlife Interactions Unit Supervisor at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. Chad, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
The Metro is hosted by Robin Vincent and Tia Graham, this week Carey Jr. II, and produced by Sam Corey, Carey Jr. II, of course, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender, our senior producer is David Lyons, and our music's done by Sam Bobian. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. And this is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Have a great day.
Join the businesses that support local radio. Your business can sponsor WDET, reach a diverse and engaged audience, and support programs that amplify Detroit. Learn how your business can benefit at WDET.org/sponsorship.